Today's couples love planning their weddings with Zola. That's why it's the fastest growing wedding platform. It's got everything couples need for their entire wedding planning journey, including finding their venue, their planner, and their vendors. And wedding pros love Zola, the sponsor of today's episode, just as much as couples do. And I'll tell you why later in this episode. Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner with The Wedding Biz, in which I conduct in-depth and revealing interviews of icons and those who I feel are the next generation icons of the weddings and event industry, all to provide you with education and inspiration. If you missed last week's episode, it was another conversation with Lewis Miller, floral designer and founder of Lewis Miller Design out of New York City. Today's guest is Susan Kidwell. Susan is the general manager with Hensley Event Resources. For the last 30 years, Susan has continued to raise the bar when partnering with planners and designers to create unique ways of transforming space. She truly enjoys the creative process of hearing a design concept and then breaking it down into production elements for her team to fabricate in multiple mediums with tents, metal, fabric, and wood. Enjoy this conversation with Susan Kidwell. Well, hey, Susan, it's so good to have you on the show. I know we met at Lori Aaron's masterclass in Wyoming. That was really something.
Yes, it was a fabulous few days.
Yeah, it was. I really enjoyed myself. And it was great for me to learn so much more about party rental tenting business, because that's kind of been a weak point for me. And so you're the first one to be on the show to talk about this, and you are the expert. So I've been excited about this for some time.
Well, no, thank you for inviting me. I love tenting and party rentals. And anytime I have an audience or an opportunity to kind of share my 30 years of wisdom and learning, I get super excited. So thank you for inviting me today.
Yeah, sure. So weren't you a competitive ice skater growing up, though? Somewhere I read that.
Yes, I was. So that was kind of my upbringing, which I grew up in Santa Rosa, which is about an hour north of San Francisco. And we were very, very fortunate because that ice arena was owned by Mr. Schultz, or we called him Sparky, who was the creator of the Peanuts comic strips.
Oh,
so
geez.
Because of that background, the whole ice arena and the opportunities that we were able to do as competitive ice skating was like so wonderful. We did all these amateur as well as professional ice shows once a year, where it really was just like the ice capades. And we did everything from ice skated and, doing solos as well as, competitive drill teams as part of those shows. And then as I got older and kind of was going through the high school and college years of my life, I transitioned to working on kind of the set building and then the business and the marketing end of things. So that really created and set the stage for me to have that passion and that love for that. It's showtime. You've got, let's turn on the smile. Let's make it happen. You have the pressure of getting it all right for the show. So that really got my adrenaline going for that showbiz aspect of things.
But why party rental and tenting? Like, why did you get into that aspect of the industry?
Well, it was a little bit by happenstance, because when I was in college, I said, well, what can I do to continue to, be involved with the Peanuts comic strips and do the marketing end of things. So he invited me to go to work in the copyright and promotions department in New York for the comic strip for Peanuts and Garfield. So I happened to just stumble into that, which was special events and productions. And because of my connection with the Peanuts comic strips and with Mr. Schultz. And after living in New York for 2 years, which I really loved the city excitement, it was time to come back to California and wanted to continue just that first touch of what I had with events and promotions, and just happened to really stumble into party rentals. And the fun part and the passion for me is that with tenting in particular, everything is math and space assessment. And I loved math growing up. So it was kind of a puzzle that fit completely together, where I could take that passion of what I loved about, the showtime and performance and getting the event right, and then having the challenge of the math and the space assessment to figure out the right amount of layout of space to host these clients' events. So it was, my background of passion of theater, my love of math, and stumbling across party rentals, and happened to be working with, some of the best tenting companies that really honed my skills for then taking and transforming a standard tent into really beautiful transformations. And that's really where we've taken our company in the last few years, which is the exciting part for me.
Yeah. And I remember at the masterclass, being able to see pictures of a lot of what you did. So I'm going to ask kind of a general question to get into this. I'd like to know the main types of tents, but what are the pros and cons overall of using tenting?
That's a really, really great question. And it sometimes gets complicated. And I don't want to get too technical for the, people who might be listening. So it's almost to the point where every tent has pros and cons. And you also have to understand what your local tent company has in their inventory, because we all vary. And there's, the standard smaller frame tents, and then you have your tension tents and your big structure tents. And depending on what's available in your market, you just need to understand, can you stake? Can you not stake? How much is wind a factor? And those are all things that really your tent company, they're the experts, and they need to walk you down the path with their recommendations. But there are certain things that as, either a planner or as a homeowner, when you really get into the more refined details of a tent and its transformation, then you really want to maybe not ask the pros and cons questions, because your tent company should guide you there. I mean, staking, not staking, where are the ropes? Where are the angle braces? Those are the questions that I really want to encourage planners to ask their tent company, the technical details of the ropes, the cables in the ceiling, angle braces on legs, because those are the things that sometimes when you have a really beautiful design that you're aspiring to in transforming your tent, and then they show up and, there's this cable that's in the wrong spot, where if you had collaborated with the tent company ahead of time, you could have maybe camouflaged that cable a little more, because every tent has its pros and cons. You're not going to get away from that. It's really more the engagement with your tent professional in understanding what they have in their inventory, what it is so that supports your design, and then working with them through it, because every con of a tent I try to turn into a positive. And so that's the fun part of making it happen.
Well, let's dig more then into your process. I mean, your approach of executing these, installations that you and the Hensley team have done. What is that overall approach and process?
Well, obviously, anytime in tenting, we definitely need to see the space to really understand the lay of the land, where water is going to flow, which direction, and where's water going to puddle. And so seeing the site for any time that you know that there's going to be an event. Sometimes if a client's going back and forth between, well, are they going to have it in a ballroom or are they going to have it in a tent? Sometimes we just put a preliminary budget together to give them some sort of idea of how much going into the world of tenting would be. But once they know they're committed to a tent because of the property, or because they just always wanted to get married in a tent or have their event in a tent, then the tent person, myself or someone on my team, really has to go to the site to assess the lay of the land. And once we do all our measurements, we kind of process that in that space. And we really don't do any of the creative dialogue there, because there's too many elements with just absorbing the space. But then once we get kind of the overall square footage of what it is that we need to support all of the functional, event details, like, is it going to be tables of 8? Is it going to be tables of 10? How many people do we envision dancing on the dance floor at one time? Are you doing buffets? All those questions that allow us to understand how much space is needed, those are important questions, because if a planner just says to me, Susan, I need a tent for 200 people, I'm like, okay, there's so much more I need to know to make sure I can give you the right size. So we see the site, we ask all those tenacious questions, and then I want to hear from the planner or designer directly what it is they're trying to accomplish visually. Because there's so many ways I can play off of that with how to help them transform that space. So hearing their design, seeing their style boards of what they're sharing with their client, those all give us the visual clues of how to then share back different suggestions as to how we can transform the space.
Yeah, I got it. So obviously the planner designer really needs to give you as much detail as they possibly can. I mean, really dig into it and have a conversation with you well ahead of time.
Yeah. And sometimes if they don't know yet, if they have a direction, then the fun part really is the collaboration.
Yeah, the creative side of this, right?
There was one event, I think Lori even mentioned it in the masterclass session, where we weren't actually in a tent, we were in a ballroom. And we were looking at like, how are we going to cover that wall? Because it was the backdrop behind the band. And I looked at that room as a tent, and I then figured out how to do beautiful gathered draping on the gable end wall, which was the first time it had ever been done in that ballroom. But again, it was the collaboration with the planner, Lori, and Kathleen, the florist, and myself. I was scratching my head like, what can we do that's different? So having that synergy with that team that's creating that vision is this super fun part for us to do.
And you know, you spent more time because of the way I asked on tenting. You know, obviously what you do, overall space transformation. Is there anything that I should be asking you about transforming a ballroom versus a tent?
The questions are the same. Like, how do you transform space using the normal elements of fabric, flooring, wood, metal? The only different constraint is obviously when you're a tent or a ballroom, you have to use inherently flame-proof IFR fabrics. And then when you're in a ceiling, in a tent, you can put those fabrics fully in the ceiling. When you're in a ballroom, unfortunately, you cannot, because we cannot cover sprinklers. So there are some variations to how we transform space, but then you just do partial swagging and you draw your eye down with then the swags in the ceiling. So the approach is still the same way. It's like, how can you look at that space, look at the focal points when guests enter? What's that focal point look like? How do you break up the space with visual elements? And that's the collaboration that happens and ultimately creates the most unique venue transformations, if it's a ballroom, a barn, a garage, or a tent.
Why is Zola the fastest growing wedding platform? Because Zola does things differently. They've created a subscription-free platform that works for wedding professionals with free listings tailored to what you do that makes your business look great. And there are no paid placements or stacked search results. They are all validated leads. Zola will match you with pre-qualified couples who they know are a good fit for your style and fee structure. If you want to connect, it's easy. And there are no annual fees or commitment. Just pay for the leads you are interested in at a price that's fair. You're in control. Then there's Zola's excellent customer support, ready to answer any question and help in any way. They'll even create your free listing for you. So grow your business with the wedding platform that's proud to do things differently. Go to zola.com/Andy. That's ZOLA.com/Andy to start your free listing and even make your first connections for free. Can you give me a story or two about some favorite event installations that you've done?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know. Big question.
I mean, we've had so many like wonderful, I call them challenges that turn into opportunities when a visual idea has been presented to me. And I guess the one that's most recent top of mind would be, because we've done so much with like transforming tents with fabrics and woods and floor coverings, but I've never had the opportunity until recently to actually create and design the actual tent itself. And this comes from it's been all over social media in the last like 6 months, with the new beautiful atrium that we designed and manufactured, where Lori Ahrens and I have probably for the last 15, 20 years been talking about wanting to do something like this, because we've always been inspired by looking at the European true atriums that are in that marketplace, but nothing has really been introduced in the United States. So how do you turn a negative into a positive? You make it happen. And we spent a lot of time collaborating on the scale of what the atrium would look like. Again, getting inspiration from the Italian ones. Like you look at them like, okay, that's a great peak, but the uprights are so bulky or so awkward. So we worked on kind of all those different design elements, did a lot of 3D renderings. And then I worked with our tenting manufacturer and had it made, and it was powder coated. We went through all the different, how to select the right powder coat color and all the metal detail that was done, not just on the perimeter, but we did metal details on the beams, interior beams, which added such an architectural element like you would in an atrium. So having that opportunity to actually make a tent from the normal nuts and bolts of tent pieces and design it in a fashion that was unique and flexible and expandable in lengths and widths was my ultimate dream, to be able to have had the opportunity, yet to have it be so well received by not just the wedding market, but also the tent market. And it was just featured on the front cover of Intense magazine, which is kind of our tent book for magazines. Yeah. And that was a pleasant surprise on December when we saw that on there. I'm like, okay, that's what our team did with working with Lori Aarons on the design. So that's kind of the icing, the crown event. But there are so many more that over the years, I just love the opportunity to collaborate. And when the designer throws me a challenge or us a challenge, and I have that blank look on my face, like, how in the dickens am I going to do that?
Right. It's the jigsaw puzzle, putting it together.
Oh, totally. And then we come back to our team and we talk with, Israel, our tenting manager, our fabrication manager, our sewing manager. And we're like, how in the hell we said that hell. How are we going to do that? So that's the fun, is the challenge. And every event has a new challenge. So that's the exciting part for me.
Well, also you've had a great deal of success. You've helped build an amazing company. What is your approach to building a team?
Well, it is teamwork. So I set a very high standard for myself. That kind of just comes up as to how I was brought up. Is like, my old saying is, you outdo yourself, you work the standard of one. I work the standard of one. I'm constantly challenging myself. But with that, I challenge my team. And I do it such that I set reachable but stretchable goals. And then I'm there to support them. And then that's the teamwork where, they can kind of, what I like to say is they can raise their white flag if they need help. I mean, I expect them to keep managing it and doing it, ask for help, but knowing that it's done in a supportive environment. Because in my younger years of being an employee, I've worked for some really great managers and owners, and I've worked for some really poor managers and owners. And I always tell my husband that, God, if I can ever, run and manage my own company, I'm going to take every lesson that I'm learning here and turn it into a positive. So I set that environment of, outdoing yourself, work the standard of one, work one as the team and helping each other, but do it in a positive environment, a positive workforce where they can strive to do a little bit more, but knowing that if they make a mistake, we always stop and say, okay, what's the learning opportunity? What can we learn from that as an individual, or what can we learn from that as a team? And that gives them the comfort of knowing, like, I'm going to pick myself back up and keep going. And then this last season during COVID, because it was such a busy year for everybody, my positive energy often was tapped just because there was so much going on of tents and events and people and lack of people. So I started a new phrase that the team really enjoyed, that was stay positive and solution focused. So we would start our day by saying, stay positive and solution focused, because no matter what happens, what goes sideways, you have to figure out a solution and be positive about it. And that carried us a lot this last season.
Yeah, that concept for me, this is many years ago, but I don't know, I had read some kind of a book about not only about staying positive, but what you're talking about, like solution focus, and more than that, to assume that when I face a big challenge, to just simply assume from the start that there is a solution. Like that changed everything for me, to assume there's a solution. I just have to uncover it.
Yeah, I mean, that's we've got to figure out a way, and everyone embracing that mentality. I get blown away sometimes with, I think I have a great idea. And then another team member says, what about this? I'm like, oh my God, I never thought about that. But you have to create that environment that wants them to continue to think creatively, think outside the box, and feel comfortable in sharing it, even though it might be like not the best idea right then, but then that triggers someone else to say something else that then evolves it. And that's not just within like our team. We do that a lot as the event team with, the planner, the designer, and so forth.
And I love when that happens. What's the difficult side of all of this for you? Like, what do you struggle with in this business?
Time management in a way of not just my time, but helping manage and set expectations of the entire team, because it's a domino effect, and something that one person is needed then to have the next person to be able to do it. So the difficult thing is just making sure that when we're doing these unique projects, that timeline has what I call the oh shit cushion of being able to, like, that. You go a certain direction, a certain spot, and like, oh shit, we need to adjust that. So the difficult part is building that timeline, knowing you have that oh shit factor in there and still being successful. But that oh shit factor is the adrenaline run that keeps you going. That's that going back to that showbiz, bringing up that I just loved when growing up, is that you still have to make showtime. You still have to make your event no matter what happens. So the difficult part is making that planning process so that we are successful.
Yes. Is there anything that I missed in terms of, let's say, from a planner, designer perspective, to be aware of, to ask, to tell you, whatever? Is there anything I missed that you'd like to address that is really important, like a key highlight?
Well, I just want to underscore always with any planner vendor relationship is just be as clear and transparent as possible with the objective. Because the objective can evolve, and that's fine. But sometimes planners evolve a concept with maybe the caterer or another vendor, but doesn't let the entire team know. And so sometimes that really affects, especially like for us when we're doing space assessment. If there's a new element that's brought into the fold that takes up space and I'm not aware of it, and I'm the one responsible for making sure that there's enough space for everything, that's the challenge. Is like just planners, whoever, the client, is just always make sure that as things evolve, that the vendor team is brought up to speed as well. So we can each manage our piece of the production elements with greatest success.
Yeah. Well, and before we go, I'd also like to know, what are you looking forward to? What are you really looking forward to? We're at the time of this recording, it's early 2023. It's a new year. What do you have coming up that you're excited about?
Well, we have. I'm trying to get all of our planners and clients to be able to get those creative juices going with their design process with their clients and or their team, and bringing those opportunities forward, because I don't know what the next new thing is going to be. I mean, I'm super excited about it because I know it's going to be something.
Yeah.
But to the planners and the creative folks out there, is like, what is that next new thing that they've been wanting to do with an event, and then bringing that so that's the creative side of the event world, and then bringing it to the logistical production minded folks that then can help create that vision. So 3 years ago, I wouldn't have known I was going to be making an atrium. So what's that next new thing? I don't know. Bring it on. Let's see what we can do.
That's funny. I'm at a place in my career and life right now where I'm itching for something like same thing. Like, what is that next thing? What can I do that keeps me, especially after all these years, all these decades, what keeps me creatively inspired and interested? And I'm always like thinking about that same thing as you are. That's really important to me.
Yeah, to me, it's like you toss out positive energy and then energy comes back and that will bring something that's even more miraculous to the event world.
So last question, Susan, how do you personally define success? What does that mean to you when I ask that?
Creating new and different space elements with an event team being planners or whatever that hasn't been done before, and doing it in a way that's, positive and energized and collaborative, because that's success. It's like, I feel I've had the opportunity and been successful with the challenges that have been brought to the Hensley team. But my success is that creating that next successful event. And that sometimes that's one big event a weekend. Sometimes it's multiple. And it's just being able to create and transform and collaborate. That's success to me.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Well, God, Susan, this has been great and very informative, especially for me. I needed to learn as much as I can about this side of the business. So I really thank you. I admire so much what you do, and I just thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And I did have one other thing I meant to also share is because you mentioned like the pros and cons of tenting and the presentation that I did. I wanted to mention that we do on our website, because during COVID, I did a Tenting 101 presentation that got a lot of feedback. So we do have that on our website, hensleyeventresources.com. If anyone ever wants to dive a little deeper into visuals and pros and cons of tenting, that is a tutorial that's been on our website for people to use. So it's a kind of another tool in their toolbox.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. Great. Well, all right. Well, thanks again and take care.
All right. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Susan Kidwell. Be sure to check out her website, which is hensleyeventresources.com. You can find them on Instagram at Hensley Event Resources. And you can also check out the show notes with event pics that our guests provided in your cell phone's podcast app or at our website of theweddingbiz.com. And remember to go to zola.com/Andy to create your free listing and get your first few connections for free. I want to mention next week's guest, and that is a revisit of my original interview of Sharon Sachs, president and founder of Sachs Productions out of Los Angeles. And finally, if you could subscribe to The Wedding Biz so you know when a new episode drops, and also follow us particularly on Instagram at The Wedding Biz, and we'll catch you next week.